Hi everyone, my name is Matt Alder from MetaShift and welcome to this webinar on mobile recruitment. I did a version of this webinar a few weeks ago for members of the firm, but I wanted to do another recording, a more concise recording, and really make it available for a wider audience. To introduce myself a little bit further, as I said, I'm Matt and my company is MetaShift. MetaShift helps corporates with their resourcing and recruitment strategies. Our particular emphasis is on digital and how you use the internet and technology within your processes. And our specialities within that are really social media and also mobile, hence the reason for this webinar today. And also on the screen, you can see a shortcut to my LinkedIn profile. So mobile recruitment's been talked about for a very, very long time. And actually, I've kind of been involved in mobile recruitment in sort of various guises for over 10 years now. The screenshot you can see on the screen is a headline from a headline from the internet, but it was also a headline in the Daily Mail from a campaign that one of my teams did basically for Sainsbury's using SMS technology, and we really upset the Daily Mail and various other newspapers by doing this. It remains the highlight of my career, but there were lots of valuable lessons that we also learned from it. And in particular, I think the lesson was that 10 years ago, although the technology was available, the audience wasn't really ready to receive recruitment messages from their mobile phones. In the last 3 or 4 years, with the rise of smartphone, that's changed dramatically. And I really want to kind of go into that in this webinar, to talk about how smartphones are affecting recruitment and the kind of things that you guys need to be thinking about and doing moving forward. So this is the agenda that we're going to look at in the webinar. First of all, I want to kind of talk about a bit of background, give you some background on the landscape about what's happening out there. Then talk about adaptation and revolution, looking at how mobile is being adopted, how it's going to change, and how it actually might revolutionize some aspects of how we do recruitment today. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, some practicality, some do's or don'ts, and some things to get you started on your mobile recruiting journey. And then finally, although case studies are actually very difficult to find at the moment, a positive case study from a company who's actually doing mobile recruiting quite well. So I thought it'd be very, very useful to look at the kind of things that those guys are doing. So let's start off by talking about the mobile landscape. 54% of the UK working population currently have a smartphone. This is a number that's dramatically increased dramatic growth in the last few years. And the growth curve keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think it's a very reasonable assumption for me to say that everyone who's watching this webinar has a smartphone. And it's highly likely that the majority of the audiences you're trying to reach out to, brand yourselves to, source from, recruit from, all have a smartphone as well. So that's the first important point. The second important point is what people are actually doing with these phones. This is a graph which was a prediction from back in April 2010 about the growth of the use of the web on mobile phones. And although it's 2 years old, it's playing out exactly as we kind of see it. So basically, what this prediction is pointing to is that by sort of early 2014, browsing the web on mobile phones will have overtaken desktop browsing. So particularly important if you're currently doing some strategic planning, you're thinking about your talent attraction, your sourcing, and your recruitment processes medium to long term. I have some clients at the moment who are sort of rebuilding their recruitment website and doing various things like that. And this is a very, very important concept for them to take on board. The reason for that is that obviously, a year, 2 years into the plan, the majority of traffic they're going to get is going to come from mobile phones. So that's why you guys really need to think about this now, because the audience is already there. We'll see later that they're already using their mobiles for recruitment purposes. and this is going to dramatically increase in the next 18 to 24 months. In some countries, the revolution's kind of already happened. So this is a graph that looks at mobile internet versus desktop internet in India. And you'll see that earlier this year, mobile internet overtook desktop internet in that country. So this is a trend that's happening globally. And in some countries, particularly countries like India and countries in Africa, this is something that's already happened, basically. So this isn't kind of some analysts just sort of plucking figures from midair. We can actually see this happening, and in many countries, this kind of revolution, this evolution, has already taken place. The other interesting concept that comes with all of this is the rise of what's kind of being termed as dual screening. Now, very, very simple to explain what this is. It's basically the fact that actually, if you think about it, a lot of your smartphone use is either within the office or within your own home when you're kind of doing something else at the same time. So I'm recording this during the Olympics, and at the start of the Olympics, there was lots of coverage about how people were turning to Twitter and various other social networks to talk about the opening ceremony as they were actually watching it on television. And in fact, throughout the Olympics, social media has played a very, very important part in the way that people communicate and talk about how they feel about various sports and various results as they're actually watching the games live, or actually as they're watching them on television, or even watching them on the internet, or even catching up with them on their mobile phones themselves. So really, really important to remember this, because later on we'll see how important it is in terms of the type of content that you want to put on your mobile, that you want to sort of make available to people who are browsing your content through mobile phones. And we'll see that actually video is becoming very, very important in the mobile space because of this dual screening concept. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. Social is absolutely mobile. So been talking about social media in this industry now for about 4 or 5 years, and it finally seems that it's sort of becoming mainstream. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's considering how sites like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube can play a key part in their strategy. If you look at the numbers and if you look at the figures, you'll see that such a vast percentage of the use of these sites is done by mobile phones that actually, if you have a social media strategy, you absolutely need a mobile recruiting strategy as well. Because if you're tweeting out links to jobs and various things like that, it's highly likely that a lot of people, will be sort of consuming them and interacting with them on their mobile phones. And if they click back and they go through to a desktop site that doesn't work properly, then your social strategy is all intents and purposes lost. The same with Facebook pages, the same with lots of other things. So on the screen now, you can see, the sort of the mobile users that Twitter and Facebook has, and it's getting up for over 50% of their users regularly, or sometimes only, access the site on mobiles. Another graph, this is some European-based data that came out in March, and it's showing the percentage growth across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter for desktops and mobile. And you can see that the mobile segment, percentage-wise, is growing massively, a lot quicker than the desktop access. So just to look at, LinkedIn at the bottom, for example, 96% mobile growth compared to 33% desktop growth. So that kind of really underlines it for me that these two are very, very much related. They're not separate things. They very much work together, and you need to think about them in tandem when you're working through this kind of strategic thinking. So what about recruitment? We've kind of seen, some of the usage stats and the handset penetration stats. But what about recruitment? Now, there's lots of nonsense talked about mobile recruitment. People sometimes getting over enthusiastic about it, or people just denying that it actually exists. And up till recently, very little research had been done to sort of prove or disprove this. Back in March, I was involved in a survey that was done in conjunction with Educate and the guys at Reconverse. And we looked at actually asking an audience, across the board of potential job seekers and potential talent, what they thought about certain aspects of mobile recruiting. I've yet to see any other kind of survey or anything else come out in this space. So this really is the sort of best thing that we have to go off at the moment. You'll see that the sample size was very large, 32,000 responses across all demographics. And I was absolutely blown away by these results. I was expecting the results to be positive, but I was not expecting the percentages to be so high. So 72% of the people surveyed were interested in receiving career information via their phone. 63% had already searched for a job on their phone. 48% had already applied for a job on their phone. Now, for those of you who are currently wrestling with your ATS provider about mobile enabled applications and sites, that might seem like a bit of a weird figure. However, in a second, when we talk about job boards, it will begin to make much more sense. So, moving on, 79% of those who hadn't applied for a job would in the future. Key stat. So your audience already wants to use their mobiles to look at your information and to actually apply for jobs. 84% of people thought companies should have a separate mobile recruitment site. Interestingly, when I actually did this webinar for the firm guys, I think there were about 60 people on the call. And not one of them had a separate mobile recruitment site. This is by no means unusual. We'll see a little bit later that actually it's the norm. But 85% of your audience thinks it would be a good idea for you to do that. That to me is a very, very compelling statistic. So the application thing, job boards. Now, job boards have really been getting a battering over the last couple of years. Everything from quality of response to the speed at which they innovate to whether or not they're getting to grips with the social web, etc., etc. However, the big job boards, Monster, JobSite, etc., have done a great job when it comes to mobile, taking their existing offering and making it available through mobile platforms. So these are just job site stats. They're quite old stats, actually. They're probably about a year old. 10% of their traffic was coming through mobile phones, and this had doubled in 12 months. So it's likely that this has probably doubled again. And this really explains that kind of application stat in the previous slide. So people are using saved profiles on job boards to apply for jobs on their phone. And this is actually happening. JobSite are very good at making their data public around this. And if you kind of have the chance to talk to them or look at it, you'll see that they have huge numbers and ever-growing numbers of applications coming from mobile platforms with people accessing save profiles that they've put somewhere else. And again, that's interesting. It's what I'm not saying that people are exclusively accessing stuff on mobiles, because obviously they're writing stuff on their desktop and their laptops at the same as part of the process, but it's part of the process, and it's something that you need to let people do, and some more on that in a second. So basically your audience is already there, and the appetite for career information is massively there as well. And as I've kind of hinted at, I don't think that the market has really caught up with this yet, and I don't think that most employers are actually doing themselves justice or doing their brands justice when it comes to serving this mobile audience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about adaptation and revolution, and kind of explain how I think mobile's starting to be used, and what it might drive in the future, because I think there's some really interesting things around this. So huge debates. Whenever I go to mobile conferences, this always seems to be the debate: should we have a mobile site or an M site, or should we have an app? Now, this is completely the wrong debate as far as I'm concerned. The two are not mutually exclusive. They're very, very different things. Now, deliberately, I'm not talking about apps in this particular webinar. That doesn't mean I think they're a bad thing, but I think that actually having a mobile site, having an M site, is a very, very important first step in terms of mobile recruiting. And if you don't have an M site, then I think you definitely shouldn't have an app, because an app is not a replacement for a mobile optimized version of your career site. So I've got nothing against apps, but if you have an app, you have to promote it separately. And also, people might come from the app to your M site, etc. So to me, the most important thing to do first is to have a mobile enabled career site. Once you've done that, then perhaps we can start getting into the debates about apps and whether they're useful or not, and what they're used for. But to me, completely the wrong debate, sends people off in completely the wrong direction currently. As I said, do you guys have a mobile site? I bet you don't. Most people don't. I kind of touched on that already, and I'll mention it again before the end, because when you think about that huge audience and that huge desire to look at careers information and apply for jobs on mobiles, big mismatch. And I think that's something, within every mismatch, there's huge competitive advantage to be had for the companies who can move quickly to take it. So, in terms of thinking about your existing career site and thinking about how you can, develop that into a mobile career site, there's really kind of three things that I think are going to happen over the coming months. The first step is to just really enable the site to be looked at, on a phone. So, making sure it's the right size, making sure that it doesn't use technology that mobile phones don't use. Then the second step is all about optimizing the experience for mobile users. I'm going to talk about those two things a bit more in a second. And then thirdly, it's about being behaviorally and context specific. Now, I'll talk about this quite a lot in a second, and this is not something that I'm envisaging people will do straight away, but it's ultimately where things are going. So let's kind of just sort of talk about these in a bit more detail. So first of all, in terms of optimizing what you already have, bear in mind, look very carefully at what technology you currently use on your career site. Some really obvious ones that Flash doesn't work on. Flash doesn't work on the Apple platform. There are various other technologies that don't work on earlier versions of the BlackBerry platform. There are lots and lots of things that actually can get you out of the running straight away in terms of users being able to look at your site. The second thing is all about optimizing for the medium. So think very carefully now about how you use your smartphone when you're browsing the web. Obviously, we type with our thumbs and we actually browse with our thumbs. So the really clever marketeers who have got to grips with how to make the most out of the mobile channel are doing things like having simple navigation, bigger buttons, and they're putting those navigation buttons near to people's thumbs. So putting there somewhere where you can reach it with one-handed with your thumb makes it a lot easier to navigate. And interestingly, they're taking the opposite as that as well. So they'll put things like buy now or subscribe now buttons in the bottom corners where they can be reached very easily. Then they'll put unsubscribe, exit the site, all the kind of sort of negative negative calls to action at the top of the screen where they're actually more difficult to reach. So really interesting when you kind of think about that. And another consideration is screen size. The graph on the pie chart on the screen now shows you the current split between handset makers in the UK. So obviously we have Apple, we have BlackBerry, but we also have HTC, LG, Nokia, Samsung, Sony, and a whole host of others. And all of these guys make phones that are different sizes. In fact, a lot of them, HTC, for example, make loads of phones that are different sizes within the same company. So no one on earth is going to have a big enough budget to optimize for every single individually for every single platform. So you need to think very carefully about how your mobile site resizes itself, and does it still work at the smallest kind of the smallest sort of smallest popular screen size. I had a really interesting case with a client a few weeks ago. I was doing a digital resourcing audit for them, looking at their whole process, looking at how they use the internet, looking at whether it's getting them access to the best talent in the right way. And they actually, quite uniquely, they actually had a mobile recruiting site. Interestingly, all of them within that company use HTC Android phones, and the agency that had designed it for them used Android phones as well. When I looked at it on my iPhone, it didn't work because the graphics were too big because it had been designed. It didn't actually fit the iPhone for a screen size. Really, really interesting, and something that was easily missed. And that really kind of shows how we're all still getting to grips with how mobile works. So think about the multiple screen sizes that you're going to be designing for. So not just the size of the buttons and the fact that people are using their thumbs, but also how different the screen sizes are. The other thing is obviously tablets and the rise of tablets. Huge. A huge category that's just been started, whether it's iPad or whatever else it might be that's out there. Tablets very much get included in the whole kind of mobile marketing, mobile recruiting debate. So also having a version of a site that works on a tablet is going to become increasingly important, because particularly I think actually to reach more senior audiences, I've noticed that lots of very senior directors, people like that, are using tablets perhaps more than they used smartphones. So some interesting dynamics there, and thinking about actually including tablets in this debate as well. Now, the third thing that I was talking about was location and context and behavior. So once, as an industry, we got to the stage where people are actually building sites that work on mobile phones that people use, we'll need to think very carefully about the context. What are people actually doing? What sort of content do they want on their phone? And at the moment, no research exists in the recruitment marketplace as to, we know that the job seekers are using their phones, we know that they're viewing information. We haven't really got to the nitty gritty of what is it that where are they doing it? Are they doing it at home? Are they doing it on the move? Are they doing it in the office, away from the corporate computer system, quite possibly? What information do they want? What part of the process does the mobile phone fill? So I'm sure research will be forthcoming in that. But let me give you an example from the travel industry of this concept, so you can get what I'm talking about. So a few months ago, I was off to a conference. This is not an unusual occurrence, but basically I knew it was at a Park Plaza hotel on the kind of South Bank. I didn't realize there were two. So I headed down immediately to the wrong one, and I got there and I needed to get to the right Park Plaza. I knew it was about a mile away, but I didn't know exactly where it was, and I was trying to work out how long it would take me to walk there, whether I needed to get a cab, and indeed which direction I needed to go in. So, like lots of people in that situation, I turned to my smartphone. I Googled the name of the hotel and the rough location, and was rewarded with the right result coming up straight away, which took me to this lovely looking mobile enabled site. Now you'll see all the things that I was talking about: big buttons, accessible by thumbs, all that kind of stuff. So far, so good. However, look at the information that's available on this page. I can look at a photo gallery. I can subscribe to a newsletter. I can look at the site in German if I wanted to. I can check rates and availability. I can actually phone. There's a link through to their phone number. I can phone them, so that's one thing. But it doesn't have the full address. It doesn't have the postcode, and it doesn't have any kind of link that I can click to take me to the map on my phone, to the GPS on my phone, to tell me how far away I am. So to me, that's a massive failure, because what this hotel chain has done is they haven't thought about the context that people might be using this site in. And I would pretty much guarantee that a lot of the use cases for this site are people trying to find the hotel, and that's not made easy from this page. So I'm having to try and remember the address, or cut and paste it and try and put it into maps. And I'm trying to do all this with my thumb while being late for the conference and trying to work out where I'm going on. So what was actually on the surface of it a very good experience was actually a terrible experience. So context is very, very important, and thinking about how your site actually works within the functionality of the phone, again, very, very important. So really, calls to action and conversions are absolutely vital on mobiles. People who are using their mobile to do something on the web want to find information quickly, or want to do something quickly. It's a very, very behavioral medium. So when we think about that from a recruitment perspective, we need to think about, well, what is it that people want to do, and what can we give them to do on our mobiles? Because it's not a passive experience; it's an active experience if you're using the mobile web. So calls to action and conversion are important. Now, I know that many of you are probably thinking, well, actually, obviously, the call to action is applying for a job, and you just can't do that on a phone at the moment. Um, this is really, really interesting, and I think a bit of kind of future gazing here, because I think that actually the mobile platform will drive great change in the recruitment industry, particularly around how people apply for jobs and how we look at applications. So, um, to give you an example, so whenever a new mass medium arrives, it normally goes through a couple of stages of transformation. And this has been true for radio, TV, internet, everything. So, first off, the traditions and practices of the previous medium get transferred to the new medium. So, if you think back to some of the very early TV broadcasts you may have seen, they're very, very kind of radio influenced, very, very all about talking, not much visuals. Um, Stage two is characteristics of the new medium are exploited to reinvent the way that things are done. So as TV developed, programs that could never be done on the radio developed. Same with the internet. Same with I don't know. Same with online video, for example. So when people first started putting videos online, they were putting hour-long, half-an-hour videos. Now people have kind of cottoned on to actually three to 5 minutes, 6 minutes is the perfect time. And YouTube has inspired a whole different types of content that didn't exist previously. So I think this is what's going to happen with mobiles in recruitment. So first of all, we see a transfer of existing activity. Then we see an adaptation to actually start to take into account the specialities of the particular medium. And then we see revolution. So at the moment, the only three ways or the three main ways that you could apply for a job on a phone, other than having a saved profile on a job board, would be to allow the candidate to leave business card level data, to somehow have an apply by LinkedIn functionality, or voice, actually allow them to phone you up, because apparently that's what phones were originally invented for. I think this will evolve, and I think we'll see a revolution over the next few years, because let's remember, it's not just the candidates who are using phones in the recruitment process to apply or wanting to apply. As recruiters yourselves, I'm sure you're using your smartphones more and more and more. And I know that while many of the ATSs have been very, very slow to respond to the candidates' needs in this instance. I've seen a few demos of recruiter mobile enabled ATS platforms. So basically, as recruitment process moves towards mobile, I think we'll see some very interesting changes. So I'm not predicting this is going to happen this year or even next year, but over the next 5 years, I think we'll see some quite fundamental changes in the recruitment industry. So let's get back down to earth in the present day and talk about some practicalities of all of this. I've cribbed this from my good friend Mobile Dave. Dave is an analyst who writes a huge amount about the mobile industry and its relation to recruitment. You can find his blog at mobiledave.me. And this is from a white paper that me and Dave produced last year. We are doing another one over the next couple of months, so watch out for links to the 2012 white paper. So this is a checklist that it's worth going through when you're looking at how, get your smartphone out, get your corporate recruitment site up on your smartphone, and think about some of these basic things. Now, at least it will give you a start in terms of where you might be and where you might need to go to. So, can you see all the images and content, or is something broken? Can you read the text without zooming? So, is the font actually big enough for the people can read it without pinching and zooming? Can links and buttons be clicked with a thumb? Vitally important, because that's how we use these phones. Is the job search easily accessible? This is all part of the calls to action that I was talking about. People probably want some information very, very quickly. They want to find jobs very, very quickly. Is there an apply process that can be completed on mobile? Obviously, I've just talked about that extensively. Are the graphics and colors consistent with other marketing materials? Very interesting, this one. A number of times I've seen companies who have built mobile sites that just look completely different from the rest of their marketing material and don't have anything to do with their employer brand or anything like that. Just because you have to sort of simplify and change your site, it doesn't mean you have to lose the core identity of it. So that's a really important thing to think of. Is the navigation obvious and simple? Again, that comes back to the time thing, comes back to the thumb thing. Can you see everything without having to scroll horizontally? So that's not vertically. That's actually when it doesn't quite fit on the screen. So think back to what I was saying about the iPhone, Android screen size thing there. Is the user automatically redirected to the right page on your M site when they click a desktop link? That refers back to what I was talking about social, when you're tweeting out jobs or tweeting out links to content. Are people actually going to a mobile enabled page? Because it's likely that they're actually seeing seeing that on their mobile. And finally, does it load via 3G in 3 seconds and under? Again, very important point. And just to reiterate, are there calls to action? How are you converting the people who are coming to this site? Really, really, really important. Another couple of thoughts. Don't do this. As part of my work, I do huge amounts of audits of corporate recruitment sites, and although the web is moving towards pictures and video, being the most important thing, if you don't believe me, just look at the BBC's Olympic site. It's nearly all pictures, video, very, very, live text, very, 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 very brief, concise when it uses text. So the web has shifted, but the recruitment hasn't. And every single website I seem to look at is the most text-heavy thing in the world. So your users already aren't reading that text on their laptop or their desktop. They absolutely won't be reading it on their mobile. So this looking at kind of mobile optimization could be a brilliant, brilliant reason to look at the use of text across all of your recruitment communications. Huge amounts of text do not translate to mobile, and to be honest with you, most people aren't reading it on a desktop either. Which then brings me to video. Seems counterintuitive because obviously, as I was saying, when we think about mobile, we think about people on the move. Are they watching video? Would they have headphones? Would they be inflicting it on the rest of the train carriage? Probably not. However, so much mobile phone usage is done at home while people are on their own broadband connection. It's been really interesting that how popular video's been. So something like 10% of all YouTube views are done on mobile phones already, and that's a number that's massively, massively growing. Also, I've kind of got some anecdotal evidence. So, someone was talking about referring to this at a conference I was at a few months ago. That a couple of companies were talking about their experience in building mobile sites, and they'd found that actually video was amongst the most important content that they actually had on the site in terms of the amounts of views that it got. So video becoming very, very important in this space, and could be key content on your mobile site as well. So finally, let me finish by talking you through a very, very quick case study of a company that's doing this really well. Case study again comes from Mobile Dave. I think it's on his site if you want to read it in more detail, but I'll go through it very quickly now. So it's AT&T, and we're just looking at the journey that you would take using, I think, an iPhone in this case, to look for a job on their site. So starts off by Googling AT&T careers. You'll see that it comes up as the top result on Google mobile search. And there's really good in terms of the expectations of what people are going to find, career possibilities even, careers, retail sales, customer service. So some really good information, mobile enabled right at the front end. When you click through, you arrive at their mobile-friendly website. You can see here, big buttons, easily accessible by thumbs, the branding, although the site is designed in a different way to their main site, the branding matches, the colors matches, really sort of clear employer brand statement at the top. Really good example of doing this well. The navigation, very, very straightforward. This is a great mobile-friendly homepage. Also, easy to find the job search. The job search doesn't send you off to some horrible looking ATS interface. Big use of drop down menus, which is obviously very important. Really simple keyword search. Very, very accessible on a mobile. And actually, when you do it, you can actually find jobs. It connects to the database properly. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but sometimes these sites don't always kind of link up with their sort of internal technological plumbing, as it were. So really good case study from AT&T. As part of a white paper he was doing, Dave also looked at the Fortune 100 companies in the States and whether they had a mobile career site. And based on this software that he was using, only 8 out of 100 did. So that really kind of enforces what I've been saying all the way through, that employers, suppliers, the market, we're kind of really behind the curve when it comes to mobile and when it comes to what the audience wants and what the audience is doing. So really sort of important point to end on there. Okay, that's it. I hope that was useful and that you enjoyed listening to my thoughts and case studies on mobile recruiting. My email address is on this slide on the screen now. So if you want to get in touch to ask any specific questions about this presentation, or to get a copy of last year or this year's white paper, or to find out more about some of the product services that we offer as a company, feel free to get in touch with me. And thank you very, very much for listening all the way to the end. Thank you.